Today, Monday, we're up to Daf Kuf Yud Aleph. We'll also do Tuesday's Gemara as well. So we're up to the very top of the page. We're discussing those who don't have a chelik in Olam Haba for various reasons. So we're up to the top of the page, and the last discussion we had was about a child that's born and never passes away very prematurely. What stage of their lives do we say that they go straight to Olam Haba? So one opinion said, we had a number of opinions. The last one was whether after he had a bris milah. And then we had another opinion. Rameir says only when you say Amen. When you say Amen for the first time, that's when you are entitled to a Cheg Olam Haba. And Amen, we concluded, is an abbreviation of Kael Melech Neman. So at the top of the page, we quote a pasuk in Yeshaya where he says, and it'll be an interesting argument of Yechon Lakish about people who are entitled to go to Gan Eden. Or the converse. Lochein, therefore, he chiva sha'el nafsha, and therefore he widened the sha'el nafsha. The sha'el is the Gehenim, upar apia, and it opened its mouth lebli chayk, without doing a chayk. These are the people who go to Gehenim, those who don't follow the chayk, the laws. What do you mean exactly? Amar Shlakish says, "Lemi shemeshayet afilu chayk echad." He's so stringent. He says that if one avera you missed out. So if you missed out one mitzvah, you're ready to go to Gehenim. Said, Hashem is not happy that you are so harsh. Ella, I'll say exactly the opposite. Even if all you did was one mitzvah, you're already entitled to go to Gan Eden. Which what exactly does that mean? Well, you do one mitzvah and all the Lavedis, you go to Gan Eden. So others want to say it means, of course, you do mitzvahs, but if you did at least one mitzvah with the real intentions, with a proper kavanah, then you're entitled to go to Gan Eden. It says in the pasuk, in the entire world, double, they will die, and a third yivasabah. 2/3 of the world will be decimated, and 1/3 will survive. Amar Shlaki said, what does it mean? Shlishi shel Shem. I mean, Shem had 3 sons, and one of the sons was so 2 of those sons are going to die, and then this last son, a Pashachad, and a third of his descendants will survive, and 2/3 won't survive, and they'll be decimated. Now we come from a Pashachad as well. I'm happy he said that. Why? Because it's possible, and this is actually quite difficult to understand what Rabbi Yechon's problem is. It's possible that the Yidden will be more than a third of his descendants, and you're saying that only a third will survive, which means you are saying that many Yidden will die as well. Now, the Eden, it says in the Torah, never grew very long. You'll be Hamat Mekol Ami, very small population. Would we ever more than a third of Apashachad's descendants? I don't know. But the fact that you're limiting it to that extent, because you went not just to a third of Noach, you went to a third of Noach's son. Within Apashachad, you went again a second third, and that's too much. I say we just leave it to Noach. His third son will say, what do you call it? Shem. All of his descendants will survive. It's the other 2 that won't survive. So then the Eden definitely won't be harmed. Then the pasuk says, Hashem said everyone should come back and do tshuva. I'm your superior. I'll take from you one out of a city, 2 from a family. That sounds like only one out of a city, 2 out of a family will survive. I'm just lucky devoting some. Take it literally. Very few people will survive. Said, I disagree. So few. Not that one will survive. If you have one righteous person in the city, that's sufficient to get mezaka everyone else, that they should also survive. 2 in the family will, even though they're not living in the same city but spread out, they will. In their schus, the entire family will survive. Mezakin kol mishpacha. If shnayim in mishpacha, 2 in a family, are mezaka the entire family regardless of where they exist. He said these are the same thing. Take it literally, that only 1 or 2 people will survive. From the city, we're not happy that you said this is too strict, too harsh. So the same argument, 1 out of a city. So Rav is saying 1 out of a city will mezaka the city, 2 out of a family will mezaka the whole family. So interesting, there's such 2 different perspectives. One was so harsh, and the other one was so understanding. Chazia, Rab noticed. Sorry, Rab noticed that Kahana, his student, wasn't in class because he was shampooing his hair. He was shampooing his hair, but solidly. Then he came in after he took a shower. Before that, you don't find yourself in the life of it sounded like he said to him, you won't find yourself in the future life of the living. In other words, you won't go to Haba. But I took a shower and therefore you got upset and you're cursing me. He said, I'm trying to tell you a pasuk. Like Timtza Toida, that Toida will not be successful by those that have a good life and then also learn Toida. Torah, we had the Gemara Brachas of hey that if you want to really be succeeding in Torah comes through Yisurin. That means that you can't just live a life of luxury, and and try to dabble in both worlds. You have to immerse yourself completely into Torah. Tanya says, it says coming up to Pesach, the four different expressions of Gula, and the last one is in Ve'eda, I take you to become my nation. It says, and then we have a Vesi. In fact, one of the reasons why we have a fifth cup, but we don't drink it, is there's a machlekes whether we have 5 cups or 4 cups, or we have a fifth cup and we leave it on the table, and the fifth cup is represented by Vesi. We compare, we equate the exodus of Mitzrayim to those that came to Israel. Just like when they entered Israel, only 2 survived out of the 600,000. Between the ages of 20 and 60, everybody perished except Yeshua and Caleb. And everyone else perished. So just like entering Israel, 2 out of 600,000. So too, the exodus from Egypt, only 2 survived out of 600,000, which is incredible. So 600,000 left, and they are only a ratio of 2 to 600,000. Whatever that means. That means that if you multiply that, you work out there were billions of Yidden in Mitzrayim as slaves. How does that work? As it is, Rashi says that 1/5 of the Yidden left and 4/5 died out, which means there were, make a calculation, roughly about 9 million Yidden in Mitzrayim before the whole Makkah thing. But according to this calculation, you're talking about mega numbers. Will come. Now what? That not everybody here. He said, Rav is saying that not everybody will come. Shenamar, it says, but answer. It says over there, but answer Shama, that you will come out over there. Kimei, that answer Shama Kimei Nura, that that you will go out there like in the days of your youth. Ukiyim Aloisim Mitzrayim, just like we left Mitzrayim. So here he's saying that according to Rav, at least, very few people will go to the Mashiach. Tanya, which is contrary to everything that we always learned, that everybody will be going out to Yemais Mashiach. Says the Gemara, and wait, Rashi says, according to Rav, when Mashiach will come, out of every 600,000, only 2 will come out to the Mashiach, which is pretty extraordinary. I once entered this elderly person. He said, boy, let me show you. Look, I want to show you what my ancestors did to your ancestors. Some of the Eden, they drowned in the Nile. As we know, they said every child is reborn thrown in the Yam. Some of them they killed actually in the sword. And and some of them they put into the wall. Because what happened there was, if a Yid, after Moshe Rabbeinu came to complain to Pari, so they made a law that everyone has to produce their own bricks, and if you didn't produce enough bricks for yourself, they would take your children or other little babies and put them into those gaps in the wall. And Moshe Rabbeinu complained to Hashem. In fact, Hashem said, "I'm putting into the wall the piece of the children are very bad." And Moshe and he said, "No, take one out." And he took one out, and it turned out to be was Micha that we learned about before, who caused all the trouble and all the consternation with the Egel Hazov, and then he built himself a house for Rabbi Zara. Anyway, that was Moshe Rabbeinu was punished. What do you mean was punished? When he saw what the Mitzrayim were doing, he said, he said to Moshe, he said to Hashem, recrimination, since I went to Pari, I think I worse. Woe was to that fact I lost all these great people, and I can't find them. And that is Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Had they come upon me, Yaakov, I read was Avram Yaakov because Shaka in Hashem's name. They never questioned my methods. They first of all, they never asked me what my name is. And you, as soon as I appointed you, the first thing you said to me is, What is your name? Amarti Lavram. I said to Avram, Kum, he's halech be'eretz la'orkol rachva. He says, stand up and Kum stand up. He's halech. I said to Avram, go and walk the land. Kilachotnan, I'm going to give you a Yisrael. Then when he wanted to bury Sarah, excuse me, Bikesh Mokum Likvar Sarah, he's looked for a place to bury Sarah, v'lei matzah. And he couldn't find Achekona Bedalad Meir Shekin Kezer. Here Hashem promised him the entire Israel. He only wants a little area, a little spot to be able to bury Sarah, and he had to pay top dollar $400. Said, and Avram questioned me? Never. And this is repeated over and over again. And it always bothered me, this Gemara, because the truth of the matter is, Ephraim did offer it, whether he wanted to or didn't. He offered Avram for free. Avram could have gotten it for free. Avram insisted on paying. And then he ended up charging him a lot of money. So what do you want? Avram is the one who sort of initiated or instigated that whole the discussion about paying the price. So why would he have kindness to Hashem? Not exactly sure. But anyway, then he continued. But the more pointedly, I said to Yitzchak, stay in this land, I'll be with you, I'll bench you. And yet when his own servants wanted water to drink, he couldn't find. Not just they had to wage a war with the people who were working for Avimelech. It says by Yitzchak had a big fight, big skirmish. The water's ours. And here Hashem promised Yitzchak everything. He didn't question anything. This is a land that you're lying in. It passes by Yetzi is yours. All he wanted was to set up a tent. He couldn't find it. He had to pay 100 ksita, had to pay money even just for a little area to have for a tent. He didn't question my midas. And they never asked me what your name is. But after you, as soon as they asked you to go represent me to the Pare and take the Eden out of Mitzrayim, liberate Eden, what's your name? In the beginning, now you're saying, now you're complaining that I didn't save the people. Now you will see, you will witness yourself what I did to Pari. And what Hashem was really, it was angry with him. He said, you're going to see what I do to Pari. But you're not going to see what I'm going to do in Israel because you're not going to survive there. Moshe made it down, and Moshe, what did he see that suddenly he expressed his wonderment and awe to Hashem? He saw the Abish's tolerance. And that is what made him so excited. He saw truth. He saw that Hashem is bound by the truth, and he doesn't show compassion. So therefore, he davened that Hashem should not just follow emes; he should also have compassion, because the law can be very brutal, and he wanted compassion. So now he says, Tanya, we learned the Braisi, he saw Hashem's tolerance. Moshe went upstairs. He found Hashem wrote the words Hashem wrote the words that I'm tolerant and I'm patient. So I'm living in tzaddikim. So he said, obviously you're talking about tzaddikim. If they make a mistake, you'll be tolerant. After the Shayim, even the Shayim, I'll be tolerant. The Shayim Yavedu. Moshe when he said, Shayim, let them be lost. Now just see what you just asked. Because Yisrael, when the Eden sinned, what do you want from me? You want me to forgive the Eden, but you yourself told me that Erech HaPayim should only be for tzaddikim. Said, but you told me after the Shayim that you're also tolerant of Shayim. So therefore, I receive. Now that's what it says in the Pasuk. But Atana Yidon L'Koyach Hashem. That your koyach of patience, compassion, should come out, and sympathy, because that's what you told me. Erech HaPayim is even to the Shayim. Rab Chogah was going up the steps in the house of Rabbi Bashela. Somebody heard a kid who was he said, that your testimony very much believed the Beischa to your house, the beautiful holy house, Hashem for a long life. This is the idea that Hashem people live a long life, and He's tolerant and everything else. And Moshe Rabbeinu, now it's Tefillah Moshe is chapter 90, but we say that the next 10 chapters are written by Moshe Rabbeinu. This is chapter 93, so this is written by Moshe as well. And it says there that David is tolerant to Eidach Yamim. And he said, this is Eidus. The son of Moshe. What he saw was not emes, and that's what he was scared, but rather he saw Hashem. He's very happy that Hashem said, "I'll be tolerant." Hashem will be a crown. Over Eved Tzaddik, it says, "Vayemahu," on that day, Yeshet Tzvakas. On that day, Hashem will be La Tedes Tzvi, a crown with Tzvi. What means Tzvi? We'll see in a minute. Or let Tzvidas Tifar, and also a crown with Tzvidas. What does that mean? L'She'ed Amei, for the remnants of his people. What is going? What Shai is saying here? My la teda tzvi, be a crown to tzvi. Tzvi also means tzabi, so those who desire him. Ula tzepidas tifara, and the splendor of tzepidas, which will say would mean tzvi, those are waiting for salvation. Lo oisim ritzoinoi umetzaplim shiyosei. Tzabi, those who desire to serve Hashem, and umetzaplim l'shiyosei, they're always anticipating the coming of Mashiach. Excuse me. Yochel akol, we'd have thought that what? That anybody who serves Hashem, even though they're haughty and arrogant, Hashem, will take care of them. No, they have to have humility. Be behaved as if he's just a remnant. In other words, he's very humble. Then the pasuk says, "Ruach mishpat," and to the spirit he will judge. The yeshiv ala mishpat, to those that sit on the mishpat, the gevuda, meishiva mechama shara, to the gate. Ruach mishpat. So now we're translating, interpreting the pasuk. The ruach mishpat, who will I will continue, and I will take care of those ruach mishpat, those who sit on judgment. And those who have strength coming back from the war into the gate, I'll take care of that. What does that mean? Somebody controls the Yetzer Hara, and as Rashi explained very nicely, the Gemara Kedushin, that you have to incite your Yetzer Teva and Yetzer Hara. It means that every time Yetzer Hara attempts to do a Veda, go out of your way to do a mitzvah, even though maybe it's not necessary right now, but do it anyway. Sitting there on judgment, that you judge correctly, you don't take any, you're not corrupt. Ula Gvura, strength, strength of the Yetzer. So there's ruling over Yetzer, which means that you have no Yetzer Hara at all. Misgaba Yetzer means you do have a Yetzer Hara, but every time you attempt to, you bring your Yetzer Tov out. And Meshiva Muhammad, Meshiva Muhammad is there. Shenoisev and Noisev Mechamshat, those who wage a war, the war of Taita. And Shara, the gates. What do you mean? People go to the gate. Which gate are we referring to? Elu Shemashkimin Umarivin. Those people who come early in the morning and leave late at night. The Bati Knesias and Shul to Daven, the Bati Madrashas in places to learn. The Midas said, what is the difference between these and these? You have other people who have very similar behaviors, and yet why do you treat these people differently? Or why do these people have these? That's one way of terming. Another way is, why do these people have these midas and others don't? He said, because you know why? Because those people are inebriated, or they're constantly following their passions and their whims, and therefore they're not following the right path. And they, all the wine, they get all they follow all their heart's desires. Poku Palila. What's Poku Palila mean? They poke Gehenim. Poku Gehenim number Latil Zois Lachala Puka. They Plila Dayonin judges number Nasa Plila. Because these people are not behaving properly and they've become corrupt, and therefore they end up in Gehenim, and they don't have these wonderful midas because they follow life's passions. Next group of people that forfeit their chelik in the Mishnah, Anchi Inadachas, the people of the city of Inadachas, they have no shame in the world to come. Remember, it says, Yotzu Anoshim B'nei B'yal B'kibecha. They will leave your midst. And leaving means they leave one way and they never come back. They don't go in the Haba. Yadichu as Yeshvi'iram, and then we reject those people who live in the city. And we'll soon see, we learn there's a number of criteria that has to be met in order to be a Nir Adachas. They ain't in the rugged, they don't get killed. First of all, you need madichim. You need people to actually seduce them or induce them or convince them to idol worship. Tomorrow later we'll talk about what happened. They did it to themselves. If the majority of people themselves on their own decide, their own religion decide to worship idols, is that called an iradachas, or you need necessarily madichim? We do need madichim, and the madichim have to be ma'oisa. They have to be locals, or ma'oisa sheva. Not only locals from that city, but those have to be from the same tribe. You also need a majority of the people. If an individual worships Avodah Zarah, he gets skila, the worst possible punishment, but nothing happens to his assets. If an entire city or the majority of the city, then they get sayif, they get a lesser punishment. I guess they get killed, decapitated. But on the other hand, or sayif, or the cherev. But on the other hand, they lose all of their possessions. To the majority of the city. It gets now. How in the world do you get to a majority of the city because each individual has to come to court. We'll see later in the Gemara. It has to be men who convince them. But if women or children, only a few people, there's no dachas. Why? Because if a woman, we're saying that if a woman or a child did it, then first two ways of learning. Either then really you would have done it anyway, because they couldn't have convinced you if you didn't believe it in the first place. A man could come over maybe and you sit to look, oh, the guy maybe knows more than I do, but whatever it does. Psychologically, the attitude was that if a woman would convince you, say, but I know better, I wouldn't listen to her. But if you did listen to her, I mean, you yourself already were ready to do it anyway without her cajoling you or persuading you. And therefore, it's not really considered a hadacha. Or her convincing would be that strong, so tomorrow you would change your mind. So it's not really permanent. On the other hand, if you were convinced by somebody, then unequal to you in your eyes, then you won't rethink it and you'll remain steadfastly a follower of that person. Of the minority, or of the people who were outside of the city or outside of your tribe, you treat like individuals. But you need two witnesses and warning to every single individual. So in one place, Rashi says it means every single individual that is committed to Avodah Zarah. You need two witnesses and a warning telling them it's Avodah Zarah, and then they have to go to court and try them. And the other way is that we're talking about the Madichim also need two witnesses and Hasra. This is the chumrah that you find by individuals over a group, a majority. If yechidim they'll get the stricter punishment, but because they get the stricter punishment on one end, we're lenient and their assets are spared. In the majority of the city, it follows Avodah Zarah than B'Sayif. Then you get a lesser punishment. You get not the skila or sreifa, but you get Sayif, the sword. But on the other hand, but they lose all the assets. Then the pasuk says, "Hake sake es yoish ve'ir." It says that you should go ahead and strike on all the dwellers of the city. What's the definition of a denizen of a city? Yoish ve'ir hazais lefichere, by the sword. So, how long do you have to reside in the city before we'll treat you like a denizen of that city? You're yoish ve'ir. So it says hachamedes, ragameles, people who freight companies or with donkeys or with camels. Ha'ivedes and makom, they travel, all the time. How long do they remain in the city before they can be considered as members of the city? In fact, if they're there for a certain period of time, they help out. As we'll see, it's 30 days. What do you mean? They can save the city. How do they save the city? They'll save the cities, for example. We'll see later. If what happens if the majority of the city, worship idols, but then if you and the minority didn't, but if you add these travelers, these passers-by, to the minority, they'll become the majority. So now it's a majority of worshiping idols. It's only a minority worshiping idols. So even though they'll get killed, but they don't lose their assets. So they help out. Then it says you should destroy. A lot of the word shenemas in the next page in the Gemara from here doesn't belong to the Gemara, and they don't know why it's constantly there. The next part of the pasuk, Hachem Oisi should destroy it. There's Kol HaShabbat, all its contents. There's Behemta and its Behemer Lefi Charav, according to the sword. In other words, they all get killed by the sword. What do you say? He says here, Oisa, Kol HaShabbat, everything in this means all the contents, and then it says the Es Behemta. What does it come to add? And its animals, isn't that automatically included? It says Kol HaShabbat. So we learn different things from it. The kanom, we learn out. First of all, nichse tzadikim. If a tzaddik happens to live in that city, shebetoicha reside in the city, and they lose everything, that all their assets in that city, even though they themselves weren't idol worshippers, so they won't get punished, but their assets they will lose, because it says in the pasuk Kol HaShabbat, everything in the city, everything, no exceptions. On the other hand, shebechutzala, but assets that they own, the tzaddikim outside of the city, plated, they get spared, because it says only that which is inside the city. However, but when it comes to the shayim, whether it's in the city or even if it's outside of the city, they lose their assets. Now, how do you know that a Russia outside of the city? It says that's kol shalala. Then it says kol shalala. Let me kol shalala. All of its plunder, all of its assets. Tigbay shul gather teichachava by saying kol shlola comes to add something, to add the assets of a Russia outside of the city. But we'll see later at Chizah how far away from the city do we say outside the city that it still gets included in the city. But it says we should do it in the big square in the middle of the city, big plaza. What happens in What happens if there is no plaza? You have to create one. If this street was outside of it, you bring the street in. Machlek is Rashi and the Rambam what exactly means bring the street in. Whether it means that you build a new street in the city, or whether it means you extend the wall, the perimeter of the city to include now that plaza that everybody used to join in. Excuse me. She never said the Srafta you should burn this by fire with a fire. The city was kol shalala, and all of its contents, kolil, should be burnt entirely. Lashem lekachet rebishte. Shalala, the loy shalal shemaim. Then we learn it says shalala, its contents. What do you mean its content? Not what? The loy shalal shemaim, but not which belongs to Hashem. Mikan omra, what do you mean belongs to Hashem? For example, a carbon belongs to Hashem. So if you had set aside a carbon, it doesn't get burnt in the city because it's not yours. It has to be shlala, contents that belong to the individuals of that city. The Kanamah, we learn the following. Hegdashis Shaba, if you have Hegdish, now there's different kinds of Hegdish. You have Kodshe Bedek Abayis and you have Kodshe Mizbeh. Kodshe Bedek Abayis means he's consecrated something for its value to donate to the base of Mikdash for its maintenance and expansions and so on. That it itself intrinsically is not holy. Its value, its representative value is holy. So normally what you do is you donate that to the base of Mikdash, and then the base of Mikdash either uses that itself or they sell it, and the money they'll use for the base of Mikdash. So if you happen to have these hegdish there, something you set aside, you consecrate it for the maintenance of the base of Mikdash. So what do you do now that this entire city has been declared as an Ir Dachas? So we say as follows: Hegdish, those contents which are hegdish, yiftu. You have to redeem it, and you have to redeem it and give the money to the base of Mikdash, and you take this item. Now, what you actually do with this item is a machlekes is showing whether now it's free, unencumbered, and you can keep it, and do whatever you want with it because it doesn't get burnt, because at the time when it was supposed to be burnt, it belongs to Hashem. Or do we say now that it's redeemed, it becomes like anything else, and you have to destroy it. With trumas, if you have truma is sacred. Yirkavu. On the one hand, it's sort of, we'll see later, maybe if it belongs to the kohen, so it's his. So therefore you can't really use it, you have to destroy it. On the other hand, because it's called truma, it's sacred, we don't want it to be burnt alongside all the other contents of the city. It's separated. So Yirku, let it just rot, let it decay. Ma'aser Sheni, the Kisvei Kodesh. What about Ma'aser Sheni? That's the tithe you bring the first, second, fourth, fifth year, which you take 10% with you to the Shalayim. And that we'll see later, Machlekes Rameya and the Chachamim, what actually happens in Ma'aser Sheni. So Ma'aser Sheni and Kisvei HaKodesh, you have Svarim. What do you do with the Svarim? On the one hand, they're yours, they're your possessions. On the other hand, they're sacred. We say, you know what we do? That we hide them. We hide them. We don't want to destroy them. On the other hand, we can't use them anymore. When it comes to Ma'aser Sheni, why don't we just let it rot? We'll see the Gemara later. Then it says it gets totally burned to the Eibishter. Bring me to the Hashem. If you carry out justice to Dacha like I instructed, as if you brought a carbon. Because what happens to carbon oil? We read in Parsha Vayikra right at the beginning. A carbon oil that gets entirely burnt on the Mizbeach. Everything gets burnt on the Mizbeach. If you burn the entire Dachas, including all its contents, I treat it like a carbon oil. Now bear in mind that we learned in Gemara before that never happened. The criteria is like practically impossible, including what we learned before that one mezuzah in the city spares the entire city. Even though we had another Tana said that he himself saw an area where it said that he used to be in Dachas. Then it says it should remain a mound forever. What does that mean? Not only can't you rebuild a city, you can't even turn it into a park, a national park. You can't do that. Rabbi Kiva says no. Don't build a society, a civilized city. But about a park land, why not? Then it said, we shall have nothing left over from that plunder. As long as the Rishayim are in the world, Hashem is angry. Once the Rishayim are gone, Hashem is no longer angry. And then he says, don't keep any residue or any remnants of that city of Ir Dachas. Says the Gemara that we learn. Yotsu hein v'lo shluchim. What happens? The enticers, they themselves, the madichim, they sent out other proxies to go and do their work. The din is there's no iradachas here. That's a complicated question. I mean, because the agents are themselves the madichim. So why don't they succeed? I mean, forget who cares why the agents went there. But if Reuven sent Shimon to go to a city and convince them all to go to, or they have said two people. So if Reuven and Shimon sent Levi and Yehuda to go to a city and convince everyone to be Ovid Avodah Zarah, who cares that was Reuven and Shimon who sent them? The fact is that Levi and Yehuda were there. They're the enticers. They're the ones who convince the people. So maybe what the Gemara means is that if they go along and say Reuven and Shimon think it's a great idea that we should all be over the avodah zarah, they didn't say it as their own idea or their own name. They kept on using someone else's. That's not really called a madiach on their own. And so there's a custom that's not considered madichim. Madichim. Or maybe he's trying to tell us, what if you send a woman or a child? We said before that they cannot be madichim. But what happens if an adult sent a woman and taught her how to convince others and she went? What happens then? And the chiddush is that's not called madichim because it's because the people themselves there's no shlichus here, and they themselves are only a woman or a child, and they're not madichim either. Taking it further, anoshi men ain't anoshi he has to two. It has to be two madichim. Davar achar anoshi men, but not if they're women. Anoshi men, but like not children. B'nei blial, bad people. Bonim sheparku osha mayin sabadei. You know why they're called bad people? Because they completely remove the yoke of heaven. The city of Indachel has to be within Israel, the layman asfar, but not if it's on the border, because you're opening up Eretz Yisrael, and we want the borders of Eretz Yisrael to be fortified and to be very strong. Yoshve Edom, those who live in the city, but the Madichim have to be locals, cannot be parachuted in from another city. Layman. And you have to repeat it over somebody else. Every single person who worships idols needs separate witnesses and warning. Even we learned. What happened when we divided Yisrael different parts. You have a girdle, and it turned out to be that there was an existing city at that time in Yisrael that straddled two shvatim. Part of the city was in one shevet and part was in another shevet. What do we do? Do we dissect the city, or what do we do there? So Rabbi Yochanan says, you'll dissect the city. Part of the city will belong to one shevet, and part of the city will belong to another shevet. And the Shlach says, no. You don't dissect cities. Wherever the bulk of the city is, in whichever region it is, whichever shevet's territory, that's who owns that city. The entire city becomes that shevet. So Esav, Rabbi Yochanan asked a question with this mission here. It says, when are you chayiv iradachas? When does it meet the criteria? The madichim have to be locals from that very city and the very tribe. If you're telling me that a city would belong to one entire tribe, then what do you mean is a second condition that these people not only are locals, but they also are members of this tribe? Of course they're members of this tribe. You just said that the entire city belongs to one tribe. My lab, the only way to explain it is that even though they are locals, it's possible that they are from another tribe. For example, like Rabbi Yochanan said, we'll split the city if it straddles two different tribes. Half from that shape good. Shema doesn't prove that Chol can eat achaz lebei shvatim. We'll split a city into two shvatim. So the shlach is like no. Belongs to one entire shevet. However, what happens if there's a member of the shevet who owns a house in the city, only had daughters, and then she married somebody, and then that person had children? He goes to that children. They yarshin their mother. So, but they're not from the tribe. They're from a different shevet. Her husband's from a different shevet. It was only a very, very short period. Remember, we had Bobasta that they're only allowed to marry members of your own shevet, but not if the rest of the time marry anybody you want. Right, two ba'ovas, hutu shvatim zelazeh, was allowed to marry each other. So what happens if the mother had no brothers? So she yashin her father in that city, and then her husband from a different shevet. When she dies, her son yashin her husband, and then from a different shevet. And that's why that's possible to be a member of another shevet and yet live in a local in the city. And the Torah says that they cannot be the madichim. Or inam you have another matana, someone gifted to them. That's another question. It says that when we're splitting up Yisrael and we're giving away 42 cities to become Arim Miklat and to also become cities of the Leviim, and it says that Yehuda and Shimon donated 9 cities. Arim Teisha two tribes, Yehuda and Shimon, because they were next to each other, they donated 9 cities Now, it doesn't say how much each one donated, so there's only one possible conclusion. Each one donated the equal amount, 4.5 cities. I mean, how can it be half a city? The only way possible is like Rabbi Yechon, that cities were split if it straddled two Shvatim. My love, Arba Palgamahai, Arba Palgamahai. Each one had 4.5 Shvatim, 4.5 cities. Why we just split a city into two? So like, no, why not? It could be 4 cities from one and 5 from another. Then doesn't make sense. Why does it say 9 cities? It should tell you that this Shevet donated 4 cities, and this Shevet donated 5 cities. We don't split cities. So I have a problem, but that doesn't deter me from my opinion.